Hello there, many thanks for joining us in this edition of Business Week, the program that brings you top business stories that made the headlines during the course of this week, including special news features, interviews, market data, and much more. Welcome to the show. Here's the highlight of the biggest stories we tracked for you over the course of this week. Now on the local front, Nigeria's Consumer Price Index, which measures inflation, increased to 16.82% on a year-on-year basis in the month of April this year. That's according to the National Bureau of Statistics. And in a related development, Nigeria's gross domestic product increased by 3.98% in the fourth quarter of last year. And the World Bank says remittance inflows to Nigeria and other sub-Saharan African countries soared 14.1% to hit $49 billion in 2021, following an 8.1% decline in the prior year. On the international front, British inflation leapt last month to its highest annual rate since 1982, hitting 9% in the month of April this year, piling pressure on Finance Minister Rishi Sunak to step up help for households facing a worsening cost of living crisis. And in Japan, the economy shrank at an annualized rate of 1% for the first time in 2 quarters in the January to March period, as COVID-19 curbs hit the service sector and surging commodity prices created new pressures, raising concerns about a protracted downturn. In the auto space, Hyundai Motor Group says it plans to invest a total of 21 trillion won, which is an equivalent of $16.5 billion, through 2030 for the expansion of its electric vehicle business in South Korea. Well, it's about a time where we bring you special packages prepared by our correspondents.
The International Civil Aviation Organization, ICAO, Directors General of Civil Aviation Authorities, Aviation Safety and Security Representatives, as well as the African Indian Ocean AFI region member states, at the start of a one-week dialogue, which also serves as the Aviation Week. Discussions here center around progress made concerning the International Civil Aviation Organization's global and regional plan, enhancement of aviation performance, key priorities for the coming year, as well as rebuilding what has been lost to the impact of the pandemic, amongst others.
The recovery of African air transport so that it can safely and securely regain its status as the fastest growing air transport market in the world must be our priority number one.
7 AFI Week will provide required pointers to assist African states to refocus on the triennial objectives for sustainable development of air transport.
The operationalization of the single African air transport market is still among the AU key priorities to ensure sustainable restart and recovery of the industry, and also to improve air transport connectivity in support of the African Continental Free Trade Area.
Nigeria's aviation authorities, on their part, seek resuscitation of the Human Resource Development Fund, which has been inactive since 2018.
Nigeria contributed immensely to that fund, and some Nigerians were trained and they gained capacity whilst it was being used. But since 2018, we haven't had anything.
The Nigeria Civil Aviation Authority also wants better cooperation and collaboration in the industry to combat challenges.
It's important for the implementation of AU Agenda 2063 because one of the key components of the AU agenda is the single African air transport market.
Nigeria also signed memoranda of understanding with Rwanda and Côte d'Ivoire on better civil aviation cooperation between the two countries. This meeting by local and international civil aviation stakeholders is expected to chart a course and bring about new plans for the development of the aviation system in Africa.
Let's bring you the feature on the show today as we take a look at the currency market here in Nigeria and the dwindling value of the Naira against the greenback and other global currencies. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this break. Many thanks for staying with us. Let's now deal with the crux of today's discourse. The Association of Broad Exchange Operators of Nigeria has called for what it says BDC's Autonomous Foreign Exchange Trading Window, that's BAFEX, saying this would help restore sanity to the market and save the Naira from further debasement. APCON says that this mechanism would serve as a pathway to mainstreaming BDCs into the official foreign exchange management system, would also enable its members to source foreign currencies from banks and other autonomous sources and offer a window for regulation of their activities. This comes as the Naira faces fresh volatility, slipping to over 600 Naira to the US dollar at the peer-to-peer platforms at the start of this week. Joining me now to discuss this and much more, I have Mukhtar Mohammed, the Chief Executive Officer of Finance with Mukhtar. Thank you very much for joining us on the show today.
Good. My pleasure, David.
Let's now start first with sentiment the currency market woke up to at the start of this week. The dollar exchanged at about 600 Naira on Monday at the parallel market, heightening fears of a further devaluation of the nation's currency, while the rate at the importers and exporters window was however at about 415 Naira 75 kobo. What do you make of the widening exchange rate spread of 184 Naira and 25 kobo? And an overall first quarter performance of the Naira against the greenback and other international currencies? Were you surprised that the 600 Naira benchmark we hit?
I think, David, the thing we have to know first and foremost is that it's a global issues. Why you are not seeing the dollar depreciate or that currency or the euro or the pounds is just because of the intents of a lot of things that developing nation does import it from those space, and that is why it's happening like that, because inflation is becoming a monster. UK just have Britain just have their first highest inflation for over 40 years. So is a major challenge in the developed economy, and emerging economy also grappling with that. But the challenge with the emerging economy is because they also have to deal with the volatility in the exchange rate. Now, going back to Nigeria, I think the major challenge we have as a nation has to do with the supply side, liquidity side. We don't seem to have so much of this liquidity. And you know why we don't have this liquidity is because most of the things that we take in daily, our day-to-day things that we need in this country, especially in the area of food items, are mostly imported. And so the pressure is always on the Naira compared to the dollar. And if you look at the parallel market, I keep saying there's no basic parameters or indices that we look to get the rate to where it's just arbitrary. I mean, people just wake up and just think, okay, this should be what the Naira should be selling, via and via, because and there's no supply, or people are not demanding for it, or so they will need it because it's going to a political season, or that and that. So there's no parameter that you can use for the import-export window. If you look at it, you see those trade fluctuate because based on demand, based on supply, so you see those trade fluctuate. But for the parallel market, it's just shown with a lot of what do you think, or what we will call a local parlays, yes, and it goes up. So you don't run an economy like that. And again, it is not done the way it is done like in other developed nation, or even in other developing nation, whereby you have to walk into a place and you know who is trading on this currency. And these people are being monitored. I mean, they are not monitored per se, they are regulated. Well, I don't like using the word monitor, but they are regulated. But what we see here is that there's no regulation. They just seem to come up with what they feel it should be the price. Even when they used to have supplies from CBN, when CBN would tell them, look, you buy at this amount, you're not supposed to go beyond 2 Naira, or 3 Naira. You see them going as high as 100 Naira, and that was why CBN had to wait the big stick. So for me, I think we don't need to be looking at the parallel market to determine what our exchange rate is, or we look at the parallel market to determine whether we have to devalue our currency or not. And that's what has been happening for thus far, because it's only in Nigeria whereby your brother in diaspora will call you and you tell him, what the Naira is changing for, and he tells you, let me check on one particular website, and then he checks on that website and he calls you. Ordinary in every developed economy, maybe developing economy, the place to check the exchange rate is either you check the banking website of the major banks in Nigeria, or you check the CBN website. But like I said, we refuse to do what we ought to do. We refuse to stop this trend because people were benefiting from it, and that is why we are where we are today.
And now, to what extent do you think the current trading pattern will play a feature in next week's MPC meeting? The CBN has been cautious, really, of the term Naira devaluation, prides itself in its interventions to see that the Naira stays afloat.
The CBN governor have said it, and he has said it over and over again, that less than 10% of forex transaction happens in the parallel market. And so he doesn't see any need why he should be worried on what is happening in the parallel market. And sometimes I agree with him, but those 10%, we need to look at who are these players. You could have 90% playing at a particular place and just 10% determine the value of your currency. You know about the 80-20 principles, which say that 20% determine 80% of what happened in your economy. So this time we're looking at the CBN going to say about 10%, and they're determining what will happen in the economy, because those 10% could just be the life key of the economy. And you know what I mean? Those 10% are those people that are the SMEs that need to import goods and that Nigerians daily use. So it's begin to affect those estimates. Like I said again before, CBN have not created a window for these people, especially the SMEs. That will be slimless. That will go beyond like what they normally experience when they deal with the Bureau de change. So until they have those windows, that makes it easier for them, and CBN must come up with regulation. So the problem that CBN had and where we are today is because they lack the manpower, the framework to give a very strong regulation of the parallel market, even when they were the ones supplying this dollar to them. So we need to look at regulation. We need to see how we can meet up this SME space, because it is basically what is driving the exchange rate this high. Because most Nigerians that brings in goods and services still patronize the parallel market. And once that exchange rate in the parallel market is high, they need it because they want their goods to come in, and no matter what it means, they have to bring those goods in. And after that, they have to pass the cost of that exchange rate to the consumer, and that is why you have inflation going on high. I keep saying it, if we are able to address the exchange rate volatility, then I can tell you for sure would have dealt with inflation in the long term and maybe in the short term.
Okay, now, APCON President Aminu Gwadabe says that there is an urgent need to enhance FX liquidity to stabilize the exchange rate for economic planning here in the country. But to what extent do you think the CBN would be open to consider this call by APCON for an autonomous exchange trading window with a determined daily maximum limit as they seek access of dollars from banks, autonomous markets, and diaspora forex window at prevailing market rates?
David, if I was giving you money, I was not able to regulate it. Will I be able to regulate it when you have to source for money yourself? I mean, just look at it that way. They have been in the CBN have been giving them parallel markets exchange for over 20-something years, and rather it has not helped. It's rather making a few people become millionaire over the night, and also to the detriment of our currency. We've seen the exchange rate move from a low of about 50 naira to a dollar to a high about 600 naira today within the shortest possible time. By the time you look at the increment we have had in an exchange rate till now, you just begin to wonder, what have we been doing? So if they want to do that, they must put their house in order. The way they go about businesses is not the way it is done. Best practice, whereby you see people hanging around the street calling you and giving arbitrary exchange rate. That's not the way. They can't even monitor their members. So it's already a challenge. So for me, it would have been a good window, because if they can source for fund, and like I said, it's supply that is our challenge. And if they could be regulated like what we have in the banking sector, yes, it could help. But does the CBN has that a strong regulatory organ to monitor this? Even when they were on giving them the money, they could not and do that. And you see, they are talking about something from bank, and that is why we keep saying that the banking sector is supposed to be the life wire of every economy, and that also include also the exchange rate. Because what we are seeing in Nigeria these days is that the banking sector is not really playing that role yet, and for me, it's a big challenge. But the CBN has come up with a policy and saying that, okay, by December, banks may begin to sort exchange rate for their customers. That will be a good one. That means you're trying the bank to develop a framework on how to get exchange rate. So what stopped banks from beginning to access the Eurobond market and said, okay, We want to have enough FX at this percentage of increase so that we, when our own customers or any customers that can meet the regulation or that the CBN has put in place, we can access this FX and they will be registered. So why do you need a bureau de change? Why did you create the bureau de change market when you can even use the banks? And again, to make it even worse for us is that sometimes you even go to the bank because the bank have a little bit of restriction. They call the bureau de change to come and meet inside the bank to exchange it for you. So it's something that the CBN will need to work at. And again, if you are working at that, also remember that the CBN is the single receiver of FX. So then the CBN have to liberalize that space so that also banks can begin to receive FX from importers and then know how they will begin to work with that. But the CBN will tell you that, look, it's once you start doing that, it's sure with a lot of malpractices. But because they don't have the regulatory framework. If you have been able to develop regulatory framework to know banks' financials and also approve those financials, I don't think it will be difficult to develop such a regulatory framework to monitor the FX market. It's just having the will and ready to do the right thing if they are not benefiting from it. So for me, I think the way to go is to create this bureau de change, the parallel market, what we are seeing, and the bureau de change do outside to create a desk in the bank that is solely for that purposes. And then let's see if we will not bring down that gap. And then we could achieve what we've been dreaming to achieve for a very long time, which is being a common exchange rate. I think it's achievable if the CBN put its mind and come up with good regulation and allow the banks to be involved in it.
And now, in contextualizing the reality we have in the foreign exchange market and the currency market, the reality remains for manufacturers and even players in the aviation sector and other key sectors is this whole issue of the prolonged forex scarcity and inadequate allocation to banks. Do you see any chance of increased allocations to meet the demand? The situation is really stifling operational efficiency to a very large extent, wouldn't you say?
Yes, David, I totally agree with you. And for me, will the bank be able to meet up the manufacturing, the aviation? You see, the only thing I think that the CBN are even really doing there is personal travel allowances. That's what they normally give. That's the one that is easily come to their school fees, when you're paying school fees outside. Then again, when it comes to health. And when you look at all these traveling allowances, it's not the ordinary Nigerian that wants to travel. When you look at school fees, it's not the ordinary Nigerian that has the capability to send his children abroad. When you look at also healthcare, most Nigerians they don't have the resources to go to healthcare abroad. So until we begin to look at the economy from the bottom-up approach, to begin to say, look, the needs of the people in the bottom must be achieved. You see, what's happening in Nigeria now is that you have the very, very poor and you have the very, very rich. You have wiped out the middle class. The middle class are the drivers of every economy. And that is the space that you're just talking about, the SME space, the manufacturer, those that are coming up with creativity, innovations. Those are the people that we need to create a market for them, especially in this FX volatility, where they can asset effort FX at when it's needed and when they need to assess it. But until we do that, we'll continue to have those challenges. So it's not a challenge that is just for Nigeria alone. I think it's a challenge that the micro, not a challenge that only the CBN should be thinking of meeting alone. It's also a challenge that I think also the fiscal policy should come hand in hand with the monetary policy and see how this problem can be addressed.
And now lastly, this is a heavy political season which precedes the 2023 general elections. How much of a pressure do you see political activities adding to the demand level? Some economists believe much of the FX warehouse by politicians will be offloaded for campaign purposes in the coming weeks, thereby boosting some level of liquidity. In the market, do you share this sentiment?
I do, but it's a lot of caution. I do, I think, but I don't think that's the right way to determine supplies, and that means that we've been having supplies through illegality, unlike what I keep saying, where the CBN has not been giving the parallel market any effects for a while now. So where did they get their effects from? So that's why that we have an economy that we cannot, we don't have data of what is coming in and how this comes in. So it's a major challenge. But I share in that sentiment. We know our politicians, because of the kind of they don't want to be investigated, especially with the kind of work the EFCC is doing at the moment. They want to be sure that they are really beating the EFCC, and sometimes they just want to keep this dollar in their houses, and during the elections you find this dollar find their way to the parallel market, and that is the major challenge. That is why I'm saying that the parallel market has been one of those markets that have not helped bring our currency to where it was, rather it has added to our problem. So we need to regulate that market. We need to come in with technology on how to regulate that market. We need to know how demands come into those markets. We need to know how they meet their supplies also. And then we need to know, because sometimes we are grappling with a lot of terrorist activities. We are grappling with a lot of money laundering. How did this money find their way into this parallel market? And we don't know how. So those are the challenges that we have. But to agree, but to add to what you have just said, I won't just but agree with what you have said, that definitely if current trends are anything to follow, if past trends are anything to follow, definitely during the period of election, we have seen stability, we've seen supply, because we saw that play out in 2015. We saw that also play out in 2019. So I don't see any reason why it could be any different now. Then if there's a difference, that really shows you how great a challenge we are in our economy if it doesn't come down during the political activity. Remember, we won't see that yet. We'll see that after the primaries of the big two political parties have been concluded. Then from June, we'll begin to see what trend the parallel market, especially, not even the import-export official market. So I see on that sentiment based on past record, but I hope it happens so that with that, the CBN can begin to put measures in place to make sure that they unify both the parallel and the official market very soon by that. Because the challenge with Nigeria is we tend to, when there's a crisis in terms of supply or in terms of demand, we tend to move to address those issues. But once those issues are addressed, we don't tend to put in policy that will make it that make those issues to be sustained for a long time, especially when there's an external shock. And sometimes again, you won't say there's little they can do, because we are a monotonous economy. We depend, our FX rate is driven by one sector, the oil sector. So you could say that, but I think they should come up with ways on how we can be able to sustain whatever result we achieve, especially when we bring these rates to a good level, and then we begin to create products. And like the CBN is creating all the kind of product, SR200, XR100, they should also get the bank involved in creating their own product too. I think if they get the bank involved and the bank begin to meet legitimate demands that were being made by the parallel market, you'll be shocked to see that the uniformity of the exchange rate will happen in the shortest possible time.
Thank you so much for your time on the show today. It's been a pleasure speaking with you.
My pleasure, David. Thank you.
Well, just before we go now, here are graphic details of Nigeria's gross domestic product report for the expenditure and income approach for the third and fourth quarter of last year, as prepared by the National Bureau of Statistics. That's it on this edition. Many thanks for watching so far. Do enjoy the rest of your weekend. I'm David Alabi. Bye for now.